Harry Potter, Journey to Godhood ch 31-40. Chapter 31, Taking the Lead. As soon as Alaric stepped onto the Quidditch pitch, screams and cheers echoed around him. These sounds mostly belonged to the girls who had rushed here to support him, even though they didn't have much faith in Alaric. Nonetheless, they still gave him their utmost support. Despite Alaric's mature nature and his skepticism about the heartthrob treatment, deep down, he couldn't help but feel a bit pleased and touched by their support. He waved to the crowd, and the cheers intensified. On the training ground, Roger walked toward Alaric, carrying 2 broomsticks. He tossed one to Alaric and asked, "Ready? Do you need some time to warm up?" Alaric shook his head, refusing, "No need. Let's start the game now." "All right then, the game begins. I'll let you attack first." "Don't say I'm bullying you later," Roger said somewhat proudly as he mounted his broomstick and flew to one side, choosing a goal as his half. The players on the field stopped, and one of them threw the quaffle to Alaric. Alaric caught the ball effortlessly, showing no signs of nervousness. As the players walked by Alaric, they greeted him warmly. When it was Cho Chang's turn, she ran up to Alaric, blushing, and whispered, "Go for it, you'll definitely win." Then, she shyly ran off, leaving Alaric slightly moved by her innocent charm. He seriously doubted if he would be able to focus under the continuous temptations of these young witches. Clearing his mind, Alaric held the quaffle and flew to the other goal. After a couple of rounds, he familiarized himself with the unfamiliar broomstick between his legs. Like Roger's broomstick, it was a slightly worn-out Clean Sweep 5, not as fast as the Nimbus 2000, but it excelled in braking systems, ideal for speed and direction control. Soon, Alaric mastered its performance. Then, he nodded to the referee waiting on the sidelines. The referee, another chaser from the team, loudly announced the start of the match. Both players circled their respective goalposts, staring at each other from a distance. To Roger, Alaric seemed too calm, abnormally calm. Roger expected Alaric, a newcomer to the Quidditch pitch, to be nervous like other rookies, exposing vulnerabilities for an easy victory. However, Alaric, holding the quaffle, calmly circled in front of the goal, constantly changing direction and posing for an attack. But the unpredictable, ever-changing trajectory of the broomstick made it impossible for Roger to determine where Alaric would strike from and in which direction, preventing him from making an interception judgment in time. Truly a bit too much of a genius. Roger thought so, but he still believed he could win easily with experience and skill. However, in the next moment, before he could react, Alaric suddenly accelerated. The previously leisurely circling Alaric turned into a lightning bolt. At a weird angle, he flew toward the goal behind Roger. With Roger's experience, he could anticipate the tremendous pressure Alaric would face during the sudden acceleration and the centrifugal force from rapid turns. These were unbearable for ordinary wizards. He's an excessively talented genius, not only in magic but also in sports. Thinking this, Roger hastily pulled the broom handle, trying to turn and accelerate to intercept Alaric midway. But it was too late. Roger could only watch as Alaric whizzed past from his upper left, entered his scoring area, and then scored a goal almost at point-blank range. 1-0. When the player acting as the referee announced this score, even he couldn't believe it. A newcomer who had never played Quidditch before, and on his second time on a broomstick, actually scored ahead against their team captain. Are all new students this strong now? They all questioned their life for a moment. In the audience stands, after a second of silence, all the girls erupted into cheers. Their idol, Alaric, didn't disappoint them. He scored against the captain of the Ravenclaw Quidditch team. With this start, even if Alaric lost in the end, it would be a glorious defeat. This 1 point was enough to prove his ability. Among them, Hermione and Penelope were particularly excited. Even the usually elegant and cool Penelope, at this moment, shouted Alaric's name with a flushed face. Alaric's performance was so stunning that both of them felt a sense of pride. Chapter 32, 1-0 and a head-on collision. The girls erupted into cheers for Alaric, while on the opposite side, all the boys and other Quidditch players who came to watch fell into stunned silence. They couldn't believe that Alaric, a new student, had managed to score first. Initially, they came here with the expectation of enjoying the spectacle of a genius failing. Little did they know that the reality would be quite the opposite. A genius is a genius, no matter what he is doing, he can make a difference. Now, his popularity among the girls will skyrocket even more, someone envied, muttering. Why is he so excellent at everything he does? Someone else shouted in jealousy. Of course, not everyone shared these sentiments. For example, Alaric's three roommates, Anthony Goldstein, Terry Boot, and Michael Corner, were genuinely happy for him, shouting his name proudly amidst the silent boys. Cho Chang, being a reserve player, was equally excited. She immediately shouted joyously when she saw Alaric score, contrasting with the other players around her who were speechless. On the pitch, Alaric leisurely returned to his half. As he passed by Roger, he provocatively asked, "How did I do?" Even someone as composed as him gradually got excited upon stepping onto the pitch, appearing quite aggressive. Roger snorted in dissatisfaction. This time, it was just luck. Next, I won't let you score a single point. However, in his heart, Roger remained vigilant, unwilling to relax even a bit. He knew that if Alaric scored again, even if Roger ultimately won, it wouldn't be Alaric losing. But Alaric didn't share the same sentiment, just smiling faintly. The one who won't get another point is you. The final score will be 3-0. He waved, indicating that he was ready. The nearby referee announced the start of the second round. This time, it was Roger's turn to attack. You're too arrogant. Roger, holding the quaffle, charged toward Alaric. I'll show you how a professional player plays Quidditch. His flying speed wasn't particularly fast, but it appeared forceful, directly aiming for Alaric. Alaric saw through it. Roger wanted to use his age, larger physique, and physical advantage to overpower him. Since Alaric appeared younger, less robust, and likely lacked proficiency in physical confrontation in Quidditch, Roger planned to exploit the situation. So, in this case, the simplest physical confrontation was the most straightforward and effective strategy. Furthermore, this was in the air, on flying broomsticks. Generally, people who hadn't received special training instinctively tried to avoid a large object flying straight at them, rather than colliding head-on. However, Roger underestimated his opponent. Endless growth potential and daily training endowed Alaric with unimaginable physical strength. Beneath his seemingly average stature, he concealed a strong and agile muscular physique. Though he didn't boast the muscle mass of a bodybuilder or weightlifter, his muscles resembled those of characters in movies, anime, or games with supernatural abilities, qualities surpassing ordinary humans. In summary, his average muscle quality could rival Marvel characters like Hawkeye or Black Widow. Although he couldn't match Steve Rogers, surpassing him was only a matter of time given his unlimited growth potential. As for Roger, he was just a normal wizard in the Harry Potter world. In this magical world, the wizards had magic resistance beyond ordinary people's expectations, but they didn't excel in physical qualities. Moreover, comparing them to superheroes in worlds like Marvel was inappropriate. Although Roger was considered strong for his age, facing Alaric now, it was like hitting a stone with an egg. Faced with Roger charging towards him, attempting to physically overpower him, Alaric's choice was direct confrontation. He flew straight toward Roger, showing no signs of backing down. At first, Roger thought Alaric was bluffing, trying to intimidate him through sheer momentum, forcing him to change direction at the last moment, losing the advantage. He believed that as long as he didn't change direction first, Alaric would urgently veer away before the collision. However, when the two got closer and closer, Roger realized he was wrong. Alaric wasn't bluffing and pretending to confront head-on, he genuinely wasn't backing down. At this moment, Roger had no choice but to grit his teeth and brace himself. After all, as the captain and senior classman, he couldn't afford to lose his momentum. As for the consequences if he accidentally caused a significant accident by colliding head-on with Alaric, he couldn't afford to think about it now. The two collided with each other. In the moment before impact, Roger was still surprised. He never expected his opponent to truly confront him head-on. Alaric seemed like a smart guy who would at least try to avoid the collision by making a sudden turn. He sighed, thinking that he had overestimated Alaric. He also subconsciously turned around, fearing that a head-on collision would cause Alaric to have a big accident. Then he would be guilty of a serious crime, and no girl in the school would be able to forgive him. At this moment, the female spectators outside the field fell silent. They couldn't believe that Alaric, who was a year younger than Roger and seemingly less sturdy, could stand up to him in a direct confrontation. The outcome of the collision between the two was destined to be tragic. Some girls had already closed their eyes, unable to bear watching any further. Hermione and Penelope turned pale, biting their lips, feeling nervous. Chapter 33, Strength and Resolve. Happy New Year everyone, I hope you all have a great 2024 and may all your desires for New Year get fulfilled. And on the day of New Year here is an extra chapter for all of you, so enjoy guys. No one had high expectations for Alaric, his failure seemed inevitable. However, in the next moment, as the two collided, Roger finally understood why Alaric dared to confront him head-on. Roger's left shoulder collided with Alaric's left shoulder. The collision of bodies, propelled by speed, produced a muffled sound. Bam! Immediately after, Roger felt an overwhelming force attack him on his shoulder, propelling him and his broomstick far away. In the next moment, a sensation of pain engulfed him. His vision flashed with stars, and his body felt as if it were about to fall apart. He couldn't hold onto the quaffle anymore, and under this impact, the quaffle flew far away. At that moment, he felt like he had collided not with Alaric, who was even thinner than him, but with a solid wall. He recalled the scene when some foolish muggles, upon discovering wizards passing through walls at platform 9/3/4, curious and attempting to imitate, ended up crashing into the wall. Back then, he thought those muggles were both stupid and ridiculous. But now, he felt that, at this moment, he was no different from those muggles. He began to be grateful for choosing to turn sideways, avoiding a direct impact. If he had collided head-on, he might have been knocked off the broomstick. That would have been a bigger humiliation. Now, just being only knocked away was the best outcome. With great effort, he stabilized the broomstick through sheer determination, avoiding a bigger accident during the game. However, by this point, the quaffle had already been taken by Alaric, who had won. In other words, this round ended with his failed attack. After a good while, the referee on the sidelines announced the score, looking dumbfounded. Outside the field, the spectators were in an uproar. For Alaric himself, the outcome after the direct confrontation was expected. However, for the onlookers, it was completely unexpected. Including the girls supporting Alaric, everyone found it hard to believe their eyes. Who could believe that the seemingly weak-looking Alaric actually sent the tall Roger flying away, seemingly effortlessly, as if the opponent hadn't used any force at all? Was there a giant hiding under that exquisite cloak? Subsequently, the girls erupted into even louder cheers. Their crush had such hidden strength. Especially some senior girls found Alaric irresistible. Hermione and Penelope hugged each other. Whether it was for Alaric's victory or his unharmed state, they were happy that he was safe and sound. And not everyone in the Ravenclaw team was silent because of Roger's failure. Ravenclaw's Quidditch team was predominantly composed of girls. When Roger failed for the first time, they hesitated due to personal relationships, reluctant to show excessive excitement. However, when Alaric defeated their captain again, all the female players couldn't help but cheer loudly, joining Cho Chang in supporting Alaric. Their genius, their crush, was indeed powerful. After the second round of the showdown, no one believed that Roger could secure a victory easily. As a newcomer, Alaric not only possessed outstanding flying talent but also impressive physical strength. In the eyes of the Ravenclaw players, with his physical strength, Alaric was already competent enough to confront Slytherin's Flint on the pitch, and he wouldn't be suppressed by his foul tactics. Then, facing such a talented player, their only advantage was their Quidditch skills and several more years of playing experience. In terms of the talent and strength, Alaric was better, and if he can use this to his advantage, he may still win against Slytherin. Therefore, Alaric's advantage, combined with his talent, gave him a chance to win in the end. Even the boys put aside their jealousy of Alaric and spontaneously started cheering for him. When two people's scores were close, the one behind would envy the one ahead. However, when the gap was large enough, the one behind would only be left with admiration. That's how human psychology works. People would naturally choose to support the underdog. Although their cheering was still a bit sparse, it proved that Alaric, with his performance just now, had earned their approval. At least no one dared to sarcastically call Alaric a pretty boy or accuse him of being sissy anymore. Of course, this might also be because they feared Alaric's strength, afraid of receiving a beating from him. On the field, Roger finally recovered from the feeling of being powerless all over, gradually regaining his ability to move. He nodded to the referee, indicating that he was unharmed. So, the next round of the match began. This time, it was Alaric's turn to attack with the quaffle. By now, Roger was thoroughly nervous. He stared at his opponent's movements, not daring to be careless. Because his opponent surpassed him in both flying speed and strength, he had to fully utilize his own skills to compete. "Come at me," he shouted at Alaric, also boosting his own morale. "You have no chance, I'm going to show you the real Quidditch skills." This time, Alaric didn't say anything. He genuinely didn't want to exchange trash talk with Roger anymore because he knew Roger was going to lose again. Even in a skill-based competition, Roger might not be able to surpass him. After all, Alaric could perform acrobatic flying maneuvers. With these maneuvers, he could offset Roger's flying skills. Combined with his knowledge of football and basketball techniques, placed in Quidditch, he will be able to outperform Roger. And these techniques, he summarized himself, were absolutely unheard of by Roger. His experience was useless in this situation. In this way, he decided not to use his superhuman strength or speed this time but to defeat Roger through skills. Defeating him in what he was best at, that was the kind of resolve Alaric chose. Chapter 34, Total Suppression. After making up his mind, Alaric, holding the quaffle in one hand, didn't waste time on probing and went straight into action. His initial strategy was the same as Roger's in the previous round, directing his flight towards the opponent. It seemed like he wanted to rely on his physical prowess to overpower Roger, replicating the success of the previous round. However, unlike before, this time he didn't fly too fast. At this speed, whether he chose to make a sudden change in direction or perform high-difficulty maneuvers, it was much easier than at higher speeds. However, from Roger's perspective, facing an opponent at this speed allowed him to make judgments on whether to dodge or let Alaric pass and then catch up. At this speed, Alaric couldn't fully utilize his speed and strength advantages. Seeing this situation, Roger was overjoyed. He sighed inwardly, thinking that young people couldn't handle provocation. With just a sarcastic remark from him, Alaric immediately abandoned his advantage and decided to compete in skills. This time, Roger was definitely going to win. So, he began to carefully observe Alaric's movements, ready to react at any moment. Seeing this situation, the Quidditch players and knowledgeable spectators around couldn't help but sigh. It was a pity that Alaric gave up his advantage and wasted his skills. As the distance between the two continued to close, everyone's hearts were in their throats. As they watched the distance between the two shrink to just a few meters, Alaric finally made a move. He pulled the broomstick to the left, attempting to pass the opponent with a sudden change in direction and go around Roger before he could react. However, the experienced Roger was well prepared. From the moment Alaric prepared for the change in direction and turned his waist, Roger accurately predicted his next move. So, he immediately responded, turning right decisively. His movements were swift, even faster than Alaric himself. That way, he had the initiative in his hands. As for the next step, whether he chose to block Alaric's flight path or cut in from the side when Alaric flew past to snatch the quaffle, it depended on Alaric's next decision. This goal was his. Roger felt secretly happy, and a long-lost smile appeared on his face. But in the next moment, he realized he was wrong. Alaric's change in direction was just a feint. His left turn was only halfway executed when he unexpectedly violated the common sense of the human body, forcefully twisting in the opposite direction, turning the broomstick from a left turn to a right turn in a short period. But facing this move, Roger didn't react, or rather, his reflexes and physical abilities didn't allow him to react. So, he was deceived by this feint and could only watch as his opponent passed by him. When he could turn around and chase, it was already too late. With ease, Alaric once again threw the ball into the goal. 2:0. Screams immediately echoed throughout the stadium. Everyone felt that their perspectives had been completely overturned by Alaric this morning. Alaric, this man, recognized as the heartthrob of Hogwarts girls, time and time again challenged their common sense. Everyone's impression of him went from an underestimated newcomer to a really talented guy with an exceptional speed, then to a player with strong physical strength, and now he defeated Roger, the captain of the Ravenclaw Quidditch team, on a skill level. Can one person's talent be this strong? But no matter what, whether male or female, whether ordinary spectators or Quidditch players, everyone cheered for Alaric. They felt that they had witnessed the rise of a legend. These Ravenclaw wizards were already looking forward to the upcoming Quidditch Cup. Ravenclaw has not won the Quidditch Cup at Hogwarts for several years in a row. They believe that with Alaric in the team, everything will change. As for Roger, he had lost confidence in himself after being repeatedly defeated by Alaric. Originally, he just wanted to educate the newcomer, but instead, the newcomer educated him comprehensively. In terms of speed, physical strength, or skills, he was inferior, making him wonder if he was dreaming right now. He really wanted to be woken up by his roommates immediately, but unfortunately, this was reality. But Roger, being the captain of the team, quickly regained his confidence, preparing to use his own skills to score in the next play and save the game. After all, compared to offense, defense requires higher expertise. Apparently, Alaric was completely new in this regard, providing him an opportunity. However, his good idea was met with cruel reality. In the next round, facing Roger's attack, Alaric appeared remarkably mature and experienced. He didn't rush to intercept Roger directly or engage in flashy pursuits. When Roger skillfully broke through his defense from an unexpected angle, Alaric remained calm. As Roger passed by him from the blind spot, he quickly made a 180-degree turn with the broomstick, then, leveraging his speed advantage, caught up with Roger from behind and overtook him. Simultaneously, he casually caught the quaffle with a light swing of his arm. This move once again stirred applause and cheers from the audience, but it was not as enthusiastic as the last time, not because his performance was subpar, but because everyone was numb to his extraordinary displays. Chapter 35, Victory and Harry's Night Out. In the next round, it was Alaric's turn to attack. This time, he changed his strategy again. Facing Roger's tight defense, he didn't even consider breaking through. Instead, he shot the ball from a distance. Under his powerful arm, the quaffle flew like an arrow released from the bow. Roger could only watch helplessly as the ball soared over his head, drawing a beautiful arc and precisely entering the goal. This time, Alaric didn't even enter the scoring zone. Such shooting skills left the young wizards in awe. The referee timely announced the score. 3:0. Roger gloomily fell to the ground, forced to face his own failure. He approached Alaric and shook hands with him. "You are the new future of our Quidditch team, I guess it's your era from now on." He left the field with a dejected figure, leaving a sad silhouette for everyone. It seemed like it would take him some time to recover from this. Meanwhile, Alaric found himself surrounded by female teammates and Ravenclaw girls. Cho Chang was the closest to him. She excitedly hugged and jumped around him. She couldn't help but leave a soft kiss on his face. All the Ravenclaws present believed that the era of Ravenclaw dominating the Quidditch Cup was about to begin. In this way, Alaric became the Ravenclaw chaser. Originally, the team was planning to recruit a chaser from the third-year students to replace the senior students leaving the team, but the spot went to Alaric. After Alaric promised to help Cho Chang and train her flying skills, another senior seeker left the team without worries, focusing on preparing for O.W.L. Cho Chang became the official seeker, which was a year ahead of schedule in the original story. On the day Alaric defeated Roger with a score of 3:0, becoming the Ravenclaw chaser, the news quickly spread throughout Hogwarts. Most people initially didn't believe it when they heard the news. But there were many young wizards who witnessed the situation on site, and their vivid descriptions made it hard for others not to believe. With this, Alaric's fame expanded beyond the image of a handsome guy. Achievements in academics, appearance, and sports were the three aspects students cared about the most. If someone excelled in one of these areas, they would be welcomed and admired by their peers. However, Alaric was more than that. He excelled in all three aspects, making him the object of admiration for most students. His fans began to include not only girls but also many boys who expressed admiration and idolization. Of course, Alaric wasn't Gilderoy Lockhart, unable to make everyone like him. Some boys and some wizards who believed in pure blood supremacy were not fond of him. Most of these individuals were from Slytherin house. Draco Malfoy was a typical example among them. He had more than once boasted in front of others, claiming that Alaric was just a dirty mudblood who knew nothing but to show off. This time, when Malfoy heard that Alaric defeated Roger, successfully becoming the chaser in his first year, his jealousy was so thick that it could be cut with a knife. Even the news of Harry becoming a seeker did not make him feel so jealous. He claimed that Alaric must have bribed Roger, deceived all of Ravenclaw, and said this was entirely biased. Rumors had it that Malfoy threw a tantrum in the common room, then wrote several long letters home. Of course, just mention the recent news, that is. The famous savior Harry Potter was admitted to Gryffindor as a seeker, but with Alaric's brilliance, this news did not cause much of a stir in other houses. Only the wizards of Gryffindor were happy for him. However, on the second day of this news, the joy of these wizards turned into anger. Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Neville Longbottom, during a night out, were caught by Filch, and each of them deducted 10 points from Gryffindor house. During breakfast, Alaric could hear the Weasley brothers arguing loudly even several rows away. George and Fred kept praising the three of them for their cool actions, saying they were awesome, and asking Harry why he didn't bring them along. But Percy was furious with Ron, threatening to report everything to their mother. On the Slytherin side, Malfoy and his two cronies laughed together, looking like they had successfully executed a scheme. Alaric knew why. In the original story, Malfoy invited Harry and him to have a wizard duel at midnight in the trophy room. But it was just a trap. Harry and Ron believed him and went to find him at midnight, but they almost got caught by Filch. However, unlike now, in the original book Hermione followed them, due to which they were able to escape that time. But now, perhaps due to the butterfly effect caused by Hermione being sorted into Ravenclaw this time, Harry couldn't escape Filch this time. Chapter 36, Three-Headed Dog and the Challenge. Alaric was adding meat sauce to the fried noodles when Anthony nudged him. Anthony whispered in his ear, "Hey, great guy, have you heard? The three of them went to explore the forbidden corridor on the third floor last night, so daring. When should we sneak a peek too?" Before Alaric could respond, Hermione interjected, "I heard it, Anthony. How could you encourage him to do such things? It could cost us house points." "Oh, Hermione, can't you lighten up a bit?" Terry Boot, sitting beside them, sounded a bit exasperated. They all agreed that Hermione was great in everything but too serious, too fond of meddling in others' business. "Yeah, Alaric, please take care of your girlfriend," Michael Corner chimed in. "I'm not his girlfriend," Hermione retorted, her face turning slightly red. However, her voice was a bit soft, and her gaze shifted uncertainly towards Alaric, evidently lacking confidence. "All right, Hermione, everyone is just discussing it. Don't take it so seriously." Alaric put down the fork in his hand, soothingly patting the girl's thick, long hair. He had become quite skilled at this action. Hermione calmly fell silent, a somewhat strange situation to Alaric. Since the incident in the flying class, this has happened several times. Every time, Alaric easily comforted the angry Hermione. However, in the past, Hermione would argue with him each time until he left her speechless. Meanwhile, Cho Chang smoothly changed the topic of discussion. "Do any of you know what's inside that corridor? I've heard many senior students secretly exploring it, but they never tell me what they find." "There's a three-headed dog inside," Penelope, sitting across from Alaric, answered the question. Now she was also a member of this little group, often staying with Alaric, Hermione, and Cho Chang. "I tried sneaking into that corridor for an adventure before. I was blocked by a three-headed dog. The big dog is much taller than me and looks fierce, showing its teeth. Although it mostly sleeps soundly, one head is always awake. By the way, I found a trapdoor on the floor where the three-headed dog lies. I think the secret is behind that trapdoor." Then she lowered her voice and whispered, "I heard that over the summer vacation, Dumbledore gathered Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout, Professor Snape, Professor Quirrell, and Hagrid to create a challenge in that corridor. Each person designed a level. Is that true? Why would they do that?" Hermione sounded incredulous. "I guess there's definitely something they don't want others to get hold of," Cho Chang confidently said. "Otherwise, they wouldn't go to such lengths to set up obstacles with stages." "I think so too." "That's what I think." Others expressed their agreement. But as a reincarnator, Alaric had a different opinion. "I actually think Dumbledore deliberately set up a trap," he explained. "If Dumbledore wanted to hide something, he could easily do it alone in a place only he knows. But now, Dumbledore's choice is to put something in that corridor, explicitly telling everyone not to enter. Obviously, he's telling others, there's a secret here. And the news that Dumbledore invited the professors to build stages has already spread, further confirming this conclusion. Dumbledore himself doesn't seem to want to hide that secret. He might even want everyone to know what's hidden there." At this point, he paused deliberately. Around him, 3 girls and 3 roommates all cast their expectant and approving glances at him, so he continued. "And the purpose of the stages is to test us. Dumbledore hopes that students can pass these stages to undergo a practical assessment. Another possibility is that these stages are for catching thieves. Someone wants to steal something from Dumbledore, and the professors set up these stages as traps. They use what the thief wants to steal as bait in the trap. The thief probably thinks these stages are Dumbledore's anti-theft measures, but in reality, the stages are just a disguise. The ultimate goal is to attract the thief's attention and make the thief believe that what he wants to steal is hidden there. Everyone believes that the more precious something is, the better it is protected. If the thief really breaks into the stages, he falls into the trap because Dumbledore wants to lure him out. Chapter 37, Exploration and Secret Planning. Alaric's analysis made everyone suddenly realize. Although they were still somewhat skeptical about Dumbledore arranging conspiracy traps, they mostly believed Alaric's explanation. However, the idea of a test for students caught their attention. The three roommates huddled together for a while, then turned to Alaric and said that the three of them were planning to challenge the corridor together. "We won't bring you along," Anthony explained to Alaric. "Your strength is too strong. With you around, we can solve any trouble. What use do we have then?" Hearing this, Hermione sharply ridiculed them. "If you want to show off your abilities, don't copy Alaric's homework every day." This hit them right where it hurt. They mumbled for a long time before finally coming up with excuses like "there's too much homework and wizards don't consider it copying." After that, Anthony, Terry, and Michael left with their plates, looking somewhat embarrassed. After a while, Hermione suddenly whispered to Alaric, how about we also find some time to check out that corridor? I also want to try Dumbledore's test." Indeed, Hermione became significantly more sensitive when it came to exams and tests, striving to be the first. Alaric readily agreed because he was genuinely interested in the magical stone hidden behind the magic mirror. Then, they invited Penelope and Cho Chang to join them. Penelope expressed interest and agreed to accompany them again, but Cho Chang declined. "I hate those scary magical creatures," she explained. "Just thinking about that three-headed dog, with its slobbering mouths, terrifies me. So, don't count me in." When it came to deciding the time to act, Alaric suggested another idea: maybe we don't need to rush into exploring. Firstly, we don't even know what else is in that corridor besides the three-headed dog. I think we should first find a way to deal with the three-headed dog and then make plans. Which means we should go to the library and look up the habits of three-headed dogs. I remember there's a book called The Monster Book of Monsters that records many dangerous magical creatures. It might mention this one, Hermione analyzed. Alaric nodded in agreement, but he added, "Actually, there's a more direct way. We could find the designer of this challenge, and get more clues from them." From the professors Penelope mentioned, "Who do you think would use a three-headed dog as a challenge?" After a brief silence, they all gave the same answer: Hagrid. The three girls suddenly realized and immediately showered Alaric with admiring glances. "You're really clever. To think of looking at the problem from this angle." Alaric modestly waved his hand, then proposed, "For now, let's stay put. On one hand, we can check the habits of three-headed dogs in the library, and on the other hand, we can find an opportunity to ask Hagrid." In fact, Alaric believed that he now had the ability to break through to the end of the challenge alone. He had read the original book and knew what each stage of the challenge was. The first stage with the three-headed dog could be handled by Himari. Although she couldn't transform into human form yet, she could already fight with her magical power. While facing a dragon, she might be a bit stretched, but defeating a three-headed dog was well within her capabilities. The second stage with the devil's snare could be dispersed with flames, and he knew how to use the fire-making spell. The third stage, catching a flying key while riding a broomstick, was his strength. The fourth stage, the giant wizard's chess, he might not know how to play the game yet, but with his intelligence, he should pick it up quickly. The fifth stage, testing logical reasoning, while most ordinary students would be stumped, he could easily solve Snape's puzzle with his intellect. But he didn't want to break through all the stages now. Because the last stage was the Mirror of Erist, and the Philosopher's Stone was hidden inside it. This magical mirror could reflect the deepest desires of people, and only those who wanted to find the stone but not use it could retrieve the stone from the mirror. And this was something Alaric couldn't do. He did want to use the Philosopher's Stone. Of course, he did want to achieve immortality, but he didn't want to use the Philosopher's Stone for it. The immortality achieved through the Philosopher's Stone had significant flaws. The user had to drink the potion created by the Philosopher's Stone every week to maintain immortality. And this kind of immortality could only keep a person alive but couldn't ensure youthful vitality. Nicholas Flamel and his wife were examples. Although they lived for several hundred years, most of the time, they had the appearance of elderly people. Moreover, Alaric believed that, with his ability, he would definitely find a more perfect way to achieve immortality. Even if he couldn't do it himself, he could achieve it through summoning or by going to different worlds in the future. After all, in countless dimensions, there must be some dimensions where there were ready-made methods for achieving immortality. Chapter 38, Adventure Preparation and Magical Materials. Alaric was merely curious about the Philosopher's Stone and wanted to experiment with it to uncover its secrets. Unfortunately, with his current level of magical skills, he didn't have the ability to crack the Mirror of Erist, at least not yet. Additionally, even if he could obtain the Philosopher's Stone, he didn't want Dumbledore to discover that it was taken by him. Until he became invincible, attracting Dumbledore's attention wouldn't be a good idea. Therefore, he could only take advantage of the confusion and bring the Philosopher's Stone with him. The best opportunity would be at the end of the semester, precisely when Harry Potter and Voldemort were vying for the Philosopher's Stone. Since the plot had already been changed, Hermione was no longer a member of the trio. Hence, he couldn't guarantee that Harry would smoothly reach the final stage and face Voldemort. To prevent any unexpected situations, Alaric decided to delay the exploration until the end of the semester. This way, they would coincide with Harry, or at least follow closely behind him. If Alaric, Hermione, and Penelope's strategy team entered the stages before Harry and Voldemort, Alaric's abilities would easily allow him to pass all the stages and reach the Mirror of Erist. However, if they did that, the premature exposure of the stages might prompt Dumbledore to reset them, drastically changing the plot. In that case, the opportunity to obtain the Philosopher's Stone through subterfuge would be greatly diminished. That was the plan. So, at the moment, there were two things Alaric needed to do. First, he had to learn how to play wizard chess, and second, he needed to get a better broomstick. This wasn't only for this quest but also for future travels and Quidditch matches. During his recent duel with Roger, Alaric had noticed the shortcomings of the Clean Sweep 5. It not only fell short in speed and maneuverability, but the quality was also lacking. Whenever Alaric wanted to exert forceful control or perform extreme maneuvers, he felt that the broomstick had reached its limit and could disintegrate at any moment. This prevented him from fully unleashing his abilities. Of course, if Roger knew about this, he might be so discouraged that he would give up on Quidditch altogether. Regarding broomsticks, Alaric had his own ideas. He planned to handcraft a suitable broomstick for himself rather than buying a ready-made one. In this world, broomsticks were made from ordinary wood, although these woods inherently possessed some magical properties. However, overall, they were still too ordinary. This applied to wands as well. But in terms of materials, Alaric also had his advantages. He could perform a cross-dimensional summoning once a month, and while most of the time he got nothing, occasionally he summoned some good stuff. This included various rare materials. Long ago, he had summoned a twig from the mother tree of Aviana, where the three world trees, Norddrossel, Teldrassel, and Vordrossel, grew. Norddrossel had been sealed by the magical power of the guardian dragon to prevent Illidan from creating a new well of eternity, becoming the mother tree of the night elves. Teldrassel was another major dwelling place for night elves, with their capital city Darnassus situated within its branches. Vordrossel, located in Northrend, was intended to be the first world tree for night elves, but due to its roots reaching too deep, even into the lair of the old god Yogg-Saron, it caused the release of Yogg-Saron's power, leading to its destruction. The mother tree, being the mother of the world trees, contained powerful magic. This twig, being Aviana's favorite and most frequently inhabited twig, possessed significant magical power. A wand made from it would undoubtedly surpass all wands in this world, including the Elder Wand. However, Alaric didn't want others to know about the existence of this twig, so he temporarily stored it until he learned how to make wands. Apart from this, Alaric had obtained other materials, such as the long horn of Tiamat and the golden fleece, which were legendary items in mythologies but had the same origin. Alaric could sense that these two materials came from the same world, the Type Moon universe. A few days ago, during the summoning day, he luckily summoned twigs from two mythical trees. Leaving aside the formidable properties of these materials, they also symbolized nature, which was quite important in magic. In terms of broomstick crafting, a broomstick made from these woods might even surpass the flying speed of the fastest broomstick. However, before creating his own broomstick, Alaric needed to find a laboratory and buy a few broomsticks to dissect and study. In fact, there was a perfect place for Alaric's laboratory at Hogwarts, the Room of Requirement. Chapter 39, Room of Requirement and Exploration of Ancient Runes. The Room of Requirement was located on the 7th floor of Hogwarts Castle, opposite the tapestry depicting the giant wielding a club to bludgeon Sir Cadogan. The method to enter this room was extraordinary. The user had to concentrate on the desired location, walk 3 times in front of that section of the wall, and a smooth door would appear on the wall. Only through this door could one enter the Room of Requirement. Alaric had personally tried the Room of Requirement before. According to his understanding, this room wasn't essentially a single room but comprised many different subspaces. Originally chaotic, these subspaces were shaped into various distinct rooms through the magic of the Room of Requirement, based on the user's imagination. The largest subspace within the Room of Requirement was a junkyard. It accumulated everything that Hogwarts staff and students had vanished using the vanishing spell. According to the original work, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, Ravenclaw's diadem, was also hidden within. When a user imagined the desired location, the magic of the Room of Requirement would screen among the shaped rooms, connecting the door with the room that best matched the conditions. When none of the shaped rooms met the requirements, the magic would shape an unstructured subspace into a room that fit the criteria. Looking at it this way, it wasn't a true Room of Requirement since the number of these chaotic subspaces, the prototypes, was finite. Once all these subspaces were exhausted, the Room of Requirement wouldn't create new rooms, and future users wouldn't be able to make requests that required a new room. Nevertheless, the magic of the Room of Requirement was indeed astonishing. Even the phase-overlapping magic of Platform 9¾ couldn't match it in terms of complexity. This was a compound magic involving spatial manipulation, telepathy, and quasi-creation. Although Alaric had only reached the 2nd year in magical studies, he could judge that it was impossible to create a Room of Requirement solely with modern spells. It undoubtedly involved more complex and fundamental magic. To master this kind of magic, one had to study ancient runes and then further research spells and ancient magic. Therefore, Alaric's immediate task was to study ancient runes thoroughly. This would enable him to master the alchemy required to make his own broomstick. Additionally, he needed to find a way to earn enough galleons to buy broomsticks for research in Diagon Alley. However, none of these tasks could be accomplished at the moment. As for galleons, he could earn them after returning to the Muggle world, and by using magic and his knowledge from his previous life he could earn enough pounds o exchange for galleons. Furthermore, he could only visit Diagon Alley after leaving Hogwarts. Considering this, everything had to be postponed until after the Christmas break. Currently, Alaric had to devote himself to studying the thick book Advanced Runic Translation. He had already finished the basic introduction to ancient runes, and with further progress, he could start practical alchemical experiments. In Alaric's eyes, the study of ancient runes was a subject that integrated knowledge from linguistics, theology, philosophy, history, folklore, and programming. Although the meaning and combination of runes had some logical connections, it mostly involved many images from mythical history. These images were what made magic different from science. In this world, the essence of magic came from different places. Wizards and magical creatures were distinguished from ordinary beings by their inherent magical power. The existence of magical power allowed them to exert influences on the material world in a manner that contradicted scientific and logical models. Due to the differences in magical power, animagi like animagus couldn't transform into magical creatures. An animagus transformed their body into the body of an animal through transfiguration, involving changing one form of matter into another through magical power. However, while magical power could transform matter, it was challenging to transform magical power itself. Including wizards, magical creatures had different amounts of magical power. Thus, when an animagus like animagus attempted to transform into a magical creature, the transfiguration spell could only turn the wizard's body into the body of the magical creature. However, the magical power of the wizard couldn't be transformed into the magical power of the magical creature. This mismatch between magical power and physical body caused the transfiguration to fail. In summary, magical power followed certain unique rules to influence the material world. These rules, when abstracted by wizards, became ancient runes. This was analogous to computer programming languages. Machine language at the lowest level was akin to the rules of the world. While machine language could be directly used to write programs, it was too complex for practical use. Therefore, someone or something processed machine language into instructions using a processor. Through these instructions, machine language was simplified into assembly language, which was the set of rules equivalent to magic. This set of rules could be used through magical power. However, for magical creatures, the rules of magic were still too complex for them to comprehend. Therefore, they could only crudely utilize magical power. Just as assembly language was further turned into programming languages through additional instructions, these magical rules were further simplified into ancient runes by some predecessors. Chapter 40, Magical Principles and the Path Forward. It is widely known that even in an age where everyone uses computers, only professional programmers understand programming languages. Ancient runes are somewhat similar in the wizarding world. Only a small number of wizards can comprehend the principles of ancient runes, and other wizards are unable to learn complex ancient runes, let alone cast spells using them. However, even for genius wizards who have mastered ancient runes, casting spells using them is a very cumbersome task. Just as even the most skilled programmer cannot send an email using a computer without any applications, they must spend time writing the corresponding program. Therefore, wizards proficient in ancient runes further combine and simplify them into spells similar to how programmers write and package code. Ordinary people only need to click with a mouse to use a program, and ordinary wizards only need to recite an incantation as required to use magic. Ordinary spells are like packaged programs that cannot be further edited or combined. However, by mastering ancient runes, one can become a programmer among wizards, understand the principles of spells, and even create magical items or invent new spells. Through research, Alaric has discovered the essence of magic to some extent. Assuming that the original physical rules of the universe are materialistic and follow logic, then magical rules are subjective and anti-logical. The difference between the two lies in whether there is purpose. Magic has purpose, but physical rules do not. Whether there is purpose is the difference between subjective and objective. This is similar to a spell like Lumos, which, from the perspective of physical rules, is just a combination of sound waves or ink molecules. Its difference from spells like illusion formation or shadowless divine edge lies only in the arrangement. However, in a subject with purpose, such as literature, the difference in meaning between these words is not just in spelling but in the subjective meanings bestowed by people. The same applies to magic. The meanings of these spells are subjective, given by magical rules. So, when the rules themselves are subjective and purposeful, it can prove that either these rules are established by people rather than naturally formed, or it can demonstrate that the system in which these rules exist, the world itself, is not materialistic but idealistic. The control variables of physical rules do not always work in magic. Having said so much, it mainly expresses Alaric's understanding of magic in the Harry Potter world and reveals his plans for the future. His plan is to master the principles of magic through research, then grasp the true laws. This is Alaric's plan for the path of becoming powerful. He has the talent for unlimited progress, unlimited strength, the ability over time and space, and a powerful learning ability. Originally, he could have specialized in physical skills. Because he can progress infinitely, if he focuses on this, he can become a warrior or physical adept like Saitama or the protagonists in Dragon Ball. He could also continuously explore his temporal and spatial talents, specialize in both, follow the superpower path, and eventually become a powerhouse capable of mastering the laws of time and space. However, driven by his interests and curiosity, Alaric chose the path of a mage, the most challenging path. Mages are not like warriors, who engage in straightforward, exhilarating battles that don't require much thought. A mage's battles are all about calculations, and a mage's strength comes from knowledge. Mages are not like superpowered individuals who manipulate elements, modify matter, and control spirits, effortlessly using their abilities. If superpowered individuals use a mouse, controller, or touch screen to manipulate reality, mages use code and keyboards, transforming the world in the most complex way. But mages are also the most powerful, because they are researchers. Only mages can understand the true nature of the world, browse the texture of rules. Mages are also creators. Although mages, like warriors and superpowered individuals, can cause destruction, only mages can truly create. They study the rules and use them to reshape the world. In his past life, whether reading novels, comics, or playing games, Alaric's favorite characters were always mages, and he looked down on warriors, priests, and others. The former were brainless barbarians who could only cause destruction and were unable to create value, while the latter were the lackeys of gods, unthinking believers relying on gifts from others. And in this life, he finally became almost a true mage and already possesses the talent to become the strongest mage. What hinders a mage's progress is never magical power but intelligence. Human learning and memory abilities have limits, and this limit is the biggest shackle restricting a mage's progress. The more knowledge one acquires, the more time one needs for review, and the slower the progress. Because of this, mages have to choose specialization, just like ordinary people can only choose one major in university. Those who choose minors and double majors are all top students. Even in the magic-abundant D&D world, the greatest human arcanist in the Toril world, the founder of the Netheril Empire, Io Alom, eventually transformed himself into an elder brain lich. But Alaric is different. His learning ability and talent for unlimited progress allow him to study and explore extensively without constraints. In the end, he believes that he can completely master the rules of the world through research on various types of magic. By then, he will be able to surpass everything purely with intelligence.